Hirsh, would you like to? Good evening. I think it's 7 o'clock. We want to try to keep this on on time. So welcome to the second League of Women Voters debate. We had the first selectman and selectman last night, and it's really the second of 4. So we're 2 down and 2 to go. And I have to say, it's really nice and fun to see human beings in the room, not just the candidates and the timers and the volunteers from the league. So there are a lot of people on Zoom still, but I like seeing you. I'm really happy to see you all in person. Now, we do video these debates, and they're going to be up. We typically put the videos up on the website a day or 2 after the debate. So if you want to listen to it again, you can do it in about 2 days. So I do have to thank a lot of people who put this debate together. I'm Becky Gillen. I'm in charge of voter services, but Elizabeth Butler works with me close hand in hand to put these debates on. Sandy Waters, our president, who's checking people in, is kind of our coach, if you will. And Helene Weiner is also at registration. We have our timers, Aaron Flynn, Lynn Gerlich, and Kath Bergweger. Very important job. The town does a lot to put this facility together too. Don Conway's on the TV and the tech, because this is also on GCTV, YouTube, as well as Zoom. And then John Thompson and Steve O'Hurley set this whole up, the chairs, everything else, the banner, he helps me put that up. And then Tammy Warren does the reservation. So our moderator tonight is Laura Smits. Laura is the past president of the CT League, and she lives in Norwalk. So she doesn't have any skin in the game on who gets elected in Greenwich. And we're also assisted by Hannah Klingbeil, who is from Greenwich High School, and she will be reading the questions tonight. I have to say that there are 4 candidates running for the Board of Education, but I got a message on October 10th that from Wendy Vizzo Walsh that she would not be participating. And I do want to read you her reason, because I think that's important. I have come to view that for me, a debate in an uncontested election is not the way to kick off a collaborative relationship with my future colleagues. I have notified the other candidates and expressed that I'm looking forward to meeting with them where we can find common ground to improve our schools. So I just felt I should pass that on to you, but we're looking forward to hearing from the 3 other candidates. I will say that I think you all know this, that the League is a 501c3 not-for-profit, and we've been around for over 100 years. And we do believe that it's a fundamental right for all Americans to be able to vote and understand what the candidates stand for. So debates like this are really an important part of our educational mission. So thank you. And now over to the moderator, and we're going.
Thank you very much, Becky, and thank you all for coming tonight. I'm going to read the format. We are using the cumulative time format this evening, and it is designed to allow the candidates time to discuss the issues. The only rule is that the total time used by each candidate by the conclusion of the debate be approximately the same. Hannah will pose questions which have been submitted by members of the audience ahead of time and vetted for clarity, appropriateness, and so that they can be answered by any candidate. The candidates will not be restricted to 1 or 2 minute responses. Instead, they may spend as little or as much time as they feel appropriate to discuss each issue. Our goal is to encourage debate. Each candidate will also be given an opportunity to present a 2-minute closing statement at the conclusion of the question period. Members of the League of Women Voters are serving as timekeepers, as Becky mentioned, and will keep the candidates and myself informed of the time expended. If a serious imbalance in time occurs during the course of the debate, I will call it to the candidate's attention and see that it is corrected. The position of the candidates, the order of responding to questions, and the order in which they will deliver their closing statements was determined by an earlier drawing. So I also want to remind everybody that when Hannah asks you the question, please remember to look at the audience since we are on film even though we all want to look at Hannah, she's a young, attractive person. We need to make sure that everybody at home can watch too. So the first question is to Ms. Kowalski. And fire away. Go ahead, Hannah. Just push the button. The button's not working.
They're stationary. Okay.
Okay, wait a minute. We'll have technical difficulties already, and we just began. All right, I'm going to ask the first question while we get this going. Okay, Ms. Kowalski, this first question goes to you.
I think we're good.
Okay,
Okay. Sorry.
go ahead, Hannah.
Greenwich has one of the highest per pupil expenditures in the state, yet student achievement sometimes falls short of community expectations. Do you agree? What will you do to ensure that all students can achieve success?
First of all, thank you for having me here tonight. And thank you, Hannah, for the question and for giving up your sports event to be here. So, because this is an important part of democracy. With respect to your question, we do have one of the highest spending per pupil rates in the state of Connecticut. And sometimes academic achievement does slip. At our last meeting, we went through the academic achievement from the past year, and we compare it to a trend over year. I do think that we need to focus on how we can better spend the money that we do spend on people to focus on academic achievement. And I think the administration is working on that as well as with the board in order to look at programs that work versus don't work. I think it's important on behalf of the board to be diving in on our operating budget and where we're spending money and where we're not, and whether or not those funds are being properly allocated to serve our children in their best needs. As you probably recall, I was adamant against the ARP funding on $500,000 that went to our student center, as I thought that money should be better spent on providing additional teachers, and particularly in the special ed space where I think we are deficient in the number of teachers. I think in those instances, we need to be careful on where we're spending our money and how we're spending it in order to focus on achievement, particularly in the past several years after COVID when we've seen a decline. And achievement is not only meant for students that are taking the AP classes and the ALP classes, but it's achievement across the board, from special ed students to our highest achievers, and making sure that they each achieve their academic success. And the one thing that the board should be focused on over the next 4 years, along with our superintendent, is the year-over-year growth for each student. Every student should be meeting their year-over-year growth, which is critically important. And right now, I know that our principals are taking a deep dive into making sure that those students that are not meeting their growth, what are those needs that they need? And that should be presented to the board to make sure that the funding is appropriate, because for $26,000 a year for each student, we should be getting more for our return.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Koven.
Thank you for the question. I agree. It's kind of two questions in one. In terms of thinking about looking at what Greenwich spends versus other towns, I think that's a difficult thing. That's kind of a broad generalization. We have a very different population than some of the other towns that we might be compared to. And Greenwich has a significant population of students who are living at and below the poverty line. So we have, it's called sort of free lunch for people who know that term, our free and reduced lunch population. So we have a high need population in that respect. And we also have a significant proportion of students who are special needs that's larger than in other towns. So I would hesitate to kind of generalize of how do we compare in terms of per student spend compared to other towns. I think that's a larger conversation about looking at specific towns. And I'm not comfortable generalizing about that. I agree with what Karen discussed about we should always be looking for opportunities to improve the educational attainment of all of our students. From the highest achieving students, the students with the greatest needs, and the budget is going to reflect that we have a diverse student body. with a lot of different needs. And sort of that to me is the beauty of our town, that's what we see in our schools, and we're lucky to have that. But I think that also does drive expense.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hirsh?
Is this on? Okay. Well, I was going to say, yes, that is multiple questions in one. And I think that I agree with both Karen and Sophie in many of the statements that were made. It's really hard to talk about a per pupil spending because not every student, it's not a one-to-one ratio, right? Every single one of our students has different needs. Some students have more needs than others. And so if you want to average it out, that may be the case. But as Sophie mentioned, we have a very diverse student body in a very diverse town. And so it's really hard to make that comparison to other districts. We also have a higher per pupil spending because we have to pay, well, we do pay our teachers slightly more because we're at the lower bottom, the bottom of Fairfield County. We want to attract the best educators we can. And it sometimes costs a little bit more to have them to come down here. But overall, in addition to discussing the per pupil cost, there are a lot of factors that go into that. More importantly, I'd rather focus on achievement. We have been getting achievement data. The fact that we were one of the only schools and the first school in Fairfield County, and as well as Westchester, surrounding counties, to have our students back in school fully during COVID really helped support some of our student scores. And while I would agree and somewhat disagree also with Ms. Kowalski as to our achievement data, we've shown a lot of growth, actually higher growth. And if you compare the growth of our students and their scores to others within the state of Connecticut, we're matching or higher than. We have high needs students here. We expect rigorous academic standards, and we expect our students to meet those. But we also need to make sure that we have the budget in place to provide our students with what they need to get those supports. And we talk about achievement data based on certain standardized tests by the state when we're looking at it as a board. But when we look at it in other ways, there's countless ways we look at how our students are growing. It's not just about a score on a state standardized test. Kids don't always go into that evenly, right? It's given in English, and not every student here speaks English as a native language as a younger student. Some students have different needs when they go into those tests. So we have to look at things more as a growth standard, right? So every student has their own academic achievement plan, has something where you're looking at their growth as compared to where they were in the year before. So Karen and I were talking about this the other night when we got our achievement data reports. It's not just about comparing this year's fifth grade to last year's fifth grade. We have to compare this year's fifth grade to where that fifth grade was as fourth graders. And that's data that we're still waiting for this year. But I would say overall, we are achieving, our students are growing at a rapid rate here. We've seen it before COVID, and we're seeing that those growth rates rise again. So, I'm exceptionally proud of where our students are now, and I see great things to come. We've put in a lot of new support standards. And as Ms. Kowalski and I are both sitting on the special education audit and supporting our students with the greatest needs, I think that that's another area where we have spent a lot of time and energy and are looking to see some additional growth data.
I just have a follow-up
Okay, go ahead.
on 2
Ms.
points.
Kowalski.
Greenwich does have a diverse population, and I think that makes Greenwich unique. But having a diverse population does not mean we shouldn't be spending appropriately and spending smarter. And I think that's looking at the individualized needs of our students. On the second part, with respect to growth, I think we need to look at growth on an individual basis, as well as a school basis and a grade level basis, and rather than a cumulative basis across the town. Because as we know, we have varying schools that are performing at different levels, and we can't look at growth as one number. We have to look at growth on an individual and school level and class level, and find which schools and teachers are performing well and which ones don't, and which ones need our support. And that's where growth happens first.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this question? Okay, the second question goes to Ms. Koven.
If the Connecticut State Department of Education gave the town 1 year to correct racial imbalances, what plan of action would you take?
Thank you for the question. It's interesting. Right after we moved here was the last time that the racial balance question came up. And I went to a lot of meetings. That was the beginning of my education about the Board of Education. And the auditorium was packed at Eastern Middle School. I went to several meetings. And what struck me was that everyone that spoke, regardless of what elementary school their children were enrolled in, they wanted their children to stay in that local school. And that is why people move to Greenwich. It's how Greenwich works. It's how people can get to work on time because they can drop their kids off or they can walk. I mean, it's fundamental to the fabric of our town. And it was, and I was very glad at the time that they didn't make any changes. I think if we had to, I don't know when you say we have to make a change, I don't know what that necessarily means, right? Because I'm a lawyer and I'm curious, like, what does that mean? How would we achieve racial balance? How are we measuring racial balance? I think that I don't know that it would make sense for us to do that, right? I mean, I think part of what I would say to that question is I don't know that that's something that the town should do. I don't think that it makes sense to bus children around town. I think it would really diminish their academic experience. I think it would diminish their social experience. I think it would change the culture of our town in a way that wouldn't be beneficial. So I, maybe that's not answering the question in some ways, but I think I wouldn't do it. I think we saw that last time that it was something that people didn't want to do and they didn't feel like there was a practical way to do it. And it would be very, very expensive. I mean, one of the things we talked about is how do you bus people all over the town? How are you going to pay for that? What's going to happen with the traffic? I don't think that I don't think that's a feasible plan. I understand sort of conceptually what the idea is behind wanting to achieve racial balance, but I think first and foremost, we need to be thinking about what's in the best interest of our school children. And I think that the things that were explored before when we ran into this question, we arrived at the conclusion as a community that it wasn't a good idea to make a change.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hirsh, same question to you.
Much like Sophie, I would say, this is a topic that has come up at least twice in my time living in Greenwich, first through RISE and then through what we lovingly called FERB back in the day. And, as Ms. Koven said, it is very clear that our community has spoken up loudly that they want community schools. We have 11 elementary schools and they represent 11 different communities and neighborhoods within our districts, within our town. Those schools then go off to 3 middle schools to our 1 high school. And if you want to judge us by that, our high school is rather diverse. Our middle schools are rather diverse. And I will go back to the fact that my children were students at Western Middle School. Western Middle School was initially noted as being racially imbalanced. They have opened themselves up to become more of a school where people can opt into. That has really changed the balance there as well. The growth scores there are incredible. And more importantly than that, they've had so many students want to opt into that school, which has changed again, their racial balance, but they've had to close their doors to new students transferring in from other parts of town. So there are options that parents have to solve some of the issues if they feel their student is not being best represented. But we as a Board of Education have heard our community loud and clear. They want their neighborhood schools. They want the diversity within their schools that's reflective of their neighborhoods. More importantly, and as Sophie had said before too, one of the other things that we had heard was busing. In order to change the balance in our schools, it would mean putting students, especially kindergartners, on buses for a very long period of time. And that's just not something that's tenable. It's not successful for our students. But ultimately, in the end result is that, we consistently go back to the state to discuss this issue. And there seem to be, I know you were there the last time with those plans, but they haven't come back to us with concerns. I think that we are meeting the needs of our students in every way possible within our schools, and to have us change the balance of certain things within our schools isn't necessarily in the best interest of how we educate our students here.
Okay, Ms. Kowalski.
So we've been facing this issue, and I, like Sophie, had been recently to the district when we had the last debate, and it was quite clear from the parents throughout the communities that they wanted their community schools. They had moved to the areas for their schools for purposes of commuting, for purposes of being able to walk to school, for after-school programs. Not all of our elementary schools have after-school programs, and other schools do, and that was a factor in where people look and where they move to. And as I sit here today and been a member of the board for 4 years and obviously took part in parents speaking up, a decade ago, I have yet to figure out what teeth the state have in order to force us to redistrict. And no one has come to us to say what in fact happens if we just say no. So I think that I agree with Sophie in the sense that it would be strong pushback in order to rebalance, to redistrict. I have no desire to redistrict, and I would come up with a plan that, as we've continued to do in Greenwich, which is to kick the can. Our neighborhood schools are set up in a way in which we can address the needs of that particular community, whether it's English as a second language classrooms. We also address needs of those parents in the community as well in order to assist those students. It would require us to revamp not just busing children, but trying to figure out how to work as a community to support the parents in all of the elementary schools for which they live near. I don't support it at all. I would support fighting it. And I think at this town we're faced with it, we would be, opening a GoFundMe page for the litigation in which we would bring against the state, because I'd really like to test it.
Okay, moving on. Third question, Ms. Hirsh goes first.
What is the proper working relationship of the board and board members with the superintendent in terms of what issues are appropriate for the board to address?
Well, it's an interesting one. Most people don't really understand actually the roles and responsibilities of the Board of Education. And for us, we have one employee, and that is the superintendent. So I think it's, really important for us, our one role is to employ the superintendent, as I mentioned. We develop policies for the district with which we task our superintendent to ensure that they are being upheld. She also creates regulations that go along with those to ensure that all the needs of our students, our staff, our parents are being met, and that there are some functions that they go back to look at when it comes to policies. We overlook facility issues. And again, we task the superintendent with that. We have contractual discussions when it comes to teacher contracts and other things like busing and whatnot. And then we sort of, we oversee things the superintendent recommends to us, like the budget. I think you asked what the proper working relationship would be is, we put our faith and our trust in the superintendent. I personally can't say that I have a degree in education. I don't have a degree in being a superintendent. So I have to put my trust and faith in someone that does. I think in the period of time that I have lived in Greenwich, there have been 6, 7 superintendents and interim superintendents. The current superintendent, I think, is one of the most versed that I've worked with in my periods of time, both on PTA council, as a PTA president, and on the Board of Education, and she's very responsive. And I know for us, it is for us to ask questions when things come to us, to share concerns that parents and other community members have, to work with other town bodies, the BET and the RTM, our selectmen, or select people, Board of Select People, and others, to sort of make sure that all the needs of our community and parents and students and educators are actually met. But for us, what it is we task our superintendent with those responsibilities. We approve things like strategic plan, which we just have put forward, and we expect her to enact upon that and bring us back results. I know Karen and I have sat on the strategic plan committee, the policy governance committee, and these are the things that we are tasked with overseeing with the superintendent and how her enact. Oftentimes we have questions and concerns that come to us directly from schools. It is not the responsibility of the Board of Education to overstep and step in, I would say, on school-related issues. Concerns with, when we forward those on to the superintendent, while we may follow up, they are not something that the board can get involved in. I know I have been asked about dates for prom that overlap with sporting events. I know I've been asked about questions on school grading policies and all sorts of other things and classroom sizes. And classroom size is something that we oversee, but I don't make the plans for what happens in the schools when they have their events. So I would say there is somewhat of a separation when it comes to that. We're tasked with overseeing 9,000 students' education and the 900 teachers that work within our schools to ensure that they're doing what they need to do to make sure that our students are successful throughout their time within our public schools and once they leave as well. So I think that's sort of a quick overview, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kowalski, same question.
I'm sorry, I need the question read again.
Of course. So what is the proper working relationship of the board and board members with the superintendent in terms of what issues are appropriate for the board to address?
So I think the proper working relationship between the board and the superintendent is one of collaboration and communication and transparency. I think that to the most part, we get that with our current board and our superintendent. I think there needs to be an open dialect and communication between the board and the superintendent. It can happen on an individualized basis between the member of the board, and it can happen collectively as through the chair of the board as speaking on behalf of the board. However, I think the best working relationship is one in which the superintendent works with and collaborates and answers questions on behalf of all the board members in an open forum. With respect to issues that are addressed to, I think Karen touched on it well, the board oversees policy and we govern through policy, whereas the administration then and through the superintendent basically upholds and effectuates the policy decisions that the board makes. The administration and the day-to-day operation of the schools is that of the superintendent. And we do vote on certain things like the calendar, and most important role between the superintendent and the board, I think, is the oversight over the curriculum, because I think that's the most important thing with respect to the academic achievement and the education of our students. But overall, I would say that the best working relationship is a collegial one.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Koven?
I'm going to have a bit of a different answer to this question because they're both incumbents and they've actually had the benefit of having a working relationship with the superintendent. And so this will be a new thing for me. I can speak as a parent in saying that in the past 11 years or 12 years, I think we've had 5 superintendents or interim superintendents. So one of the things that I feel is most important as a member of the Board of Ed or as a candidate for the member of the Board of Ed is really supporting that superintendent and making sure that they're successful so that they can stay. And one of the things I was reflecting on today is in the private schools in town. I think Tom Phillips has been at Brunswick for 29 years and Molly King just left Greenwich Academy after 19 years. And I think, best practice is you want to have the top person in your school district or in running your school stay for a good long tenure so that they can set up systems and execute policies. And so, I think part of what the Board of Ed can do is advocate on behalf of the superintendent and help them do their job. So, that's my hope. And certainly I agree with the comments of Karen of, I think a collegial, transparent relationship is very important. I've been very impressed with Tony Jones. I think that she is an amazing communicator and did a phenomenal job during COVID, both with the policies that she enacted and getting the kids back into school, but also the way that she communicates clearly with parents and communicates in her own voice. I appreciate in her voicemail that she's the one who does it. And I'm look forward to working with her and supporting her. And I hope that she has a long tenure.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready for question 4. And Ms. Kowalski, you get this one first.
There has been pressure on the BOE from the town finance board to shrink the size of Central Middle School from what is outlined in the educational specifications. Do you agree or disagree with this assessment? Why or why not?
I think I've been quite clear on how I feel about CMS and the size of the project. I have voted it down every vote for the last 2 years. And I think I said it best at our last meeting in which we voted on the interim amount for $74 million in connection with that. I have had 2 children go through CMS. And I currently have 1 child at CMS. CMS does need to be redone. I've never denied that fact, and I've spoken clearly, and I was probably one of the first ones. This is a great opportunity for us to build a great school. I think the scoping of the project is beyond what we need at this point in time. And even if I think we can build a phenomenal school within the right scope for the right amount and number of students that we are seeing in our schools at this point in time. And the amount of savings that we could save with respect to that school, we could put towards teachers. And as far as I'm aware, it's the person that you put in front of the classroom that educates our students. And they have from the very beginning. Despite what that school is right now, it is producing excellent students that are doing amazing things through high school and beyond. Our recent program with respect to our science programs, we had CMS students do the early science program at the high school, and all of them were winning outstanding rewards. It is not necessarily the building, it is the teacher in front of them. And saving $10 million just on that building alone could fund 10 teachers for 10 years. And I think that we need to focus on how we spend our money and spend it right. Yes, we do need to rebuild Central Middle School, but I think the scope of the project needs to be adjusted. But I have been in the minority on that one. Do I feel there's been pressure from the BET to shrink the size? I don't feel any pressure when I make the decisions that I make. I make the decisions based upon what I'm hearing from the community, what I'm hearing from constituents, and my own personal beliefs.
Thank you, Ms. Koven.
So the other day I was looking at the enrollment data for the past 60 years for Greenwich Public Schools, and it fluctuates up and down. And in 1988, there were 2,200 fewer students in our schools than there are today. And right now at 8,662 students, we're just about 80 students below the average for the past 60 years. So, it goes up and down. In my experience, my kids have gone through Riverside and Eastern Middle School. They have been massively overcrowded for the entire time that my kids have been there. And I see that has real educational impacts on them. At Riverside School, we have to start lunch at 11 o'clock in the morning, and the last lunch is at 2 in the afternoon. And anyone with kids knows that when your kid is hungry, they're not really paying attention, they're not learning. And if we had a bigger cafeteria, which we should have, it should be in the works right now, because that was in the 2018 capital plan for a Riverside School to be under construction, and we would have a larger cafeteria. We could have fewer lunch blocks, and they could be at a more rational time, and people wouldn't be eating at 1:45 when they arrive at school at 8:30 in the morning. So I think that I agree that teachers teach, buildings don't teach, but buildings do make a big difference in terms of what your educational experience is. And in terms of Central Middle School, I appreciate that, we've looked at enrollment numbers, but I think Greenwich is a very attractive town. And if we build a new Central Middle School, I think we would end up with more students because people want to come and be in that nice school. And our enrollment numbers are up this year significantly over what we thought they were going to be. And actually, going back to the racial balance conversation that we had many years ago, I kept the handouts that they handed out at that time, and they would have Riverside School being 200 students fewer than it is today. So enrollment numbers are tricky, right? They're very often wrong. We don't know. If we have a big influx of people leaving New York City for all sorts of reasons, our enrollment numbers can go up. And I think that we need to be prepared, and we should be building schools that are going to last for 100 years. Riverside School is celebrating 90 years next week. And, you know, when we're putting tens of millions of dollars, over $100 million in a school, and it's going to last 100 years. I'm okay with it being a little bit larger because we need to accommodate that we could have higher enrollment at some point. And when the school is too small, that has real impacts, and I've seen it with my own children. So I disagree. I think that we should be building our schools anticipating that enrollment fluctuates, and we don't want to build a school that is too small. And then in 5 years, we say, oh, like this cafeteria is too small, or we don't have enough classrooms. It's, you know, Joe Kelly spoke very eloquently at the Board of Ed meeting a couple of weeks ago saying, we've scrubbed these numbers, you know, these are the correct numbers. And he talked about having 200 meetings to talk about the school. And, you know, actually, you know, I think it makes more sense. I would err on something being slightly larger than having something be too small. And actually, Fred Camillo said, we have never built a project in the town of Greenwich that has ended up being too big. You know, we always end up filling the capacity, whether it's a school or a civic center. So I would hope that, you know, that we would move forward with this project because it's been an incredible amount of time and effort. And honestly, it's been very costly to spend this much time to have these discussions. So I hope that we can push forward.
Okay, Ms. Hirsh.
If you build it, they will come. I'm just going to say that as a parent of a student that was supposed to be the first kindergarten class into Glenville, when that was being redone, he wasn't, you know, side note. We watched as Glenville fought to have their school built bigger. And they were told at the time that they would never have more than a certain set number of sections of the school. Well, within a year and a half of that new school's doors opening, we outgrew that school. I don't want to see the same thing happen to Central Middle School. You know, classrooms, there weren't enough classrooms, people had to take and repurpose some of the other rooms that were very thoughtfully built within Glenville to address student academic needs. The current Central Middle School, the one that we have now, was built to meet a budgetary number years ago. Corners were cut. It's why we really need to rebuild that school from the ground up, as opposed to what we're doing with our older schools, which need to be renovated just to meet the current educational standards. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there in regards to the building's cost, size, and design. It is the role and the responsibility of the Board of Education to decide on educational specifications as to what is needed within our schools to educate our students. It is not any other board's responsibility to tell us what we need within our school space to educate our students. You know, the board has had deep discussions about that. It's also, you know, the time we spend revisiting and revising those educational specifications are taking us away from focusing on things like academic achievement. So, you know, I know, like Karen, we have taken a deep dive many a time, and we always come to some sort of agreement. But basically, right now, our school is being built for approximately 440 to 660 students. And could you fit more in there? You probably could. I mean, just look at Eastern. We have consistently stuck more students in there than is advised for the appropriate size of a classroom to meet the educational needs of the students in there. It makes no sense for us to spend the kind of money that we're looking to spend to build this school that doesn't meet the current or needs of our future students. You know, we want, as Sophie had said, we want to build a school that's going to last for 80 to 100 years and not saddle our future residents with costs to rebuild this school time and time again. I think most of the important things we can think, we've heard elected officials repeatedly state, even on, I think, the radio today, that there's no urgency needed for funding for Central Middle School. But I assure you that it is needed urgently. In February of 2022, we shored up Central Middle School to ensure that it was safe for students and staff. However, we were told then that those repairs were only serviceable for 5 years. The clock is ticking on those repairs. It's not a permanent solution. We have to address this now. We need to start focusing on putting shovel in the ground to make sure that our students have a safe and secure building that meets their educational needs. Otherwise, we're going to have to start looking for alternate locations to to have, or alternate solutions to shore up that school. And let me tell you, that's simply going to add to the cost. You know, we had a master facility plan that was asked for by the BET in order for them to make long-range funding plans. And in 2018, the Board of Education came forward with a 15-year master facility plan. We are 5 years into that plan and not a single project has begun. Central Middle School was moved up. We also have Julian Curtis that we're waiting to get funding for to start, Old Greenwich, and Riverside, which was coming shortly thereafter. And I can tell you right now that the Republican members of the BET repeatedly said they're pro-education and that they support our schools. So I say, please put your money where your mouth is. The Board of Ed unanimously approved a request for the interim appropriation for construction of Old Greenwich School, since we received our MI on that. Yet it was brought up at the BET Budget Committee, and the motion for construction funding failed in a 2-2 vote, meaning that if that item didn't pass out of the Budget Committee, it's not going to necessarily go before the full BET for a vote. My concern is that if we're not going to even fund something, you know, as like Old Greenwich, which is desperately needed, we're not going to be getting funding for Central Middle School. When I tell you we need it, it's not a want, it's not a nice to have, it's a necessity. So, I mean, to me, it's not about shrinking the school. We've looked at every single way we can to reduce costs, but you know, it costs what it costs. And the longer we push this down the road, I can tell you, never in the history of time has something cost less by waiting. So, you know, balance the cost of our students and their education and their safety against the numbers that we're being given by trusted resources, you know, experts, I should say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Speaking of Old Greenwich School, go ahead, Hannah. And the first question this time goes to Ms. Koven.
Do you support the renovation of Old Greenwich School at a cost of $42 million? Why or why not?
I do support the renovation. I think that the building committee has been extraordinary. They've worked incredibly hard, and the school is in desperate need of renovation. It's not accessible. I was actually speaking to a mother last week whose son was injured playing sports, and he went to ONS to have his leg examined. And the doctor said, okay, well, we're going to put you in a cast. And then he said, well, wait, where do you go to school? And he said, I go to Old Greenwich School. And he said, okay, well, then I'm going to put you in a boot because you can't have a cast because you go to Old Greenwich School and you won't be able to get in and out of the building and you won't be able to go to your classes. And it's just unacceptable. I mean, talk about disrupting your learning, right? Like he's not getting proper medical care. And then apparently now he's walking around the school in a boot and he has to go to all of his things. He's having a terrible time. He's late for everything, you know, because there's no elevator. Like it has real impacts on the children every day, not to mention when it pours rain and we have raw sewage in the basement, which is disgusting, but also highly unsanitary and scary for kids, right? I mean, you don't want that. I remember when I was in elementary school, we had a problem with the bathrooms. I still remember it to this day. I remember waiting to go home to go to the bathroom and kind of desperately running all the way home. My mother's like, why are you doing this? And I was like, I don't want to go in those bathrooms, you know, and that was a long, long time ago. And I remember that distinctly. That had a big impact on me. So for these children to be in this school that is not appropriate, you know, it's having an impact on them every day. And I think the building committee has worked very hard. And I think the need is just absolutely compelling. And I believe that the cost is appropriate.
Okay, Ms. Hirsh, same question for you.
I think I made most of my thoughts on Old Greenwich School known in my
Okay.
previous answer because I
That's
didn't know
fine.
what was coming. But I just, you know, I'd like to add on, you know, I noted we had the master facility plan put forward in 2018. Old Greenwich was one of the top of the list of schools that needed that renovation. I fully support the need and the funding. I think our Old Greenwich School Building Committee has done an exceptional job in laying out every detail that we could have asked for, looking into costs associated and ways to lower those costs. But I have to say, if you go back and you look through that 15-year master facility plan, not a single one of these expenses were a surprise. They were all brought up 5 years ago. Improvements are expensive, but our public schools are economic drivers. They're worth it. People consistently choose to move to areas like Old Greenwich because of the school, because it's walkable. The community there is vibrant and really wonderful. And I hate to hear consistently that when we have, the rise in sea levels and rainfall, that sewage flows into some of those kindergarten classrooms. It's unacceptable in a community like Greenwich. It's unacceptable anywhere. And the fact that we're still looking at it, we're still being, it's not ADA accessible. We've had to have students in classrooms moved because a student has had a broken leg or a teacher can't get upstairs to their classroom. It's mind-boggling that this is still happening in a community like Greenwich. And I will simply say, we as a board, I believe, voted unanimously on almost every single thing that came before us for Old Greenwich, including the request for the interim appropriation to start this project now. It needs to be started now. And so I would just say, I truly hope that our capital projects, which have long been prioritized, we simply need to fund them, and we need to fund them now.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kowalski.
Thank you. So obviously, with respect to the Old Greenwich, I sat on the feasibility committee and went through that process. And I do believe that the Old Greenwich facility school is the right size moving forward. My understanding with respect to the vote is that, in fact, the BET approved the $1.5 million to move that programming, move that school forward and continuing to do the work that it is in order to get to the very next stage and remove the 3 conditions on that funding. It does not slow that school down in order to get a shovel in the ground. It is moving it forward, and the BET said, my understanding is that get to the next phase, and when you come back, like all other phases, and ask for the interim at that point in time. I don't think we've received, as many indications as such would be suggested that they wouldn't do that. And I think we need to continue. The project has not slowed down, and it will continue to move forward. With respect to the master facilities plan, I think it's a little bit outdated. My understanding is that plan was built for around the concept of an individualized learning program, which we're not doing anymore as part of our curriculum and program in GPS. And so I think that the program itself and the numbers there are somewhat outdated in connection to also our priorities, which we continue to shift around as things and issues pop up and how we deal with them. And that's been through the help of our facilities person within the administration that helps guide us in those, and we've taken those issues up as they've needed to. I do believe Old Greenwich will get done. I believe it will get done right, and I will believe it'll get done on a proper timeline as it runs through the town's process. And I think it would probably behoove everyone, and I'm not truly familiar with the town's process as it is, but there is a process, and my understanding is we're following the process. And that project is not slowed down. It's continuing to move forward in the stages, and it's funded to do that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this? Ms. Hirsh.
I'd just like to add, yes, the numbers in the master facility plan may be outdated because that was 5 years ago and costs do escalate. But more importantly, that plan was not built. The master facility plan was not built based on a certain type of learning need. It was a comprehensive assessment of all 15 of our school facilities as well as Havemeyer, and to modernize aging structures and meet, current educational needs and new state standards and requirements. And it was built with the understanding that as time moved over that 15 years, there would be needs to be adjustment. There was some inflation built in, but clearly, we're already 5 years down the line, so we're going to have to adjust that to begin with. And I'd like to just I forgot to mention also when we were talking earlier about the changing sizes of Central Middle School, and this would be the same for Old Greenwich. As much as I would love to take money from a school facility building project and put it towards operational costs, we have 2 separate budgets. We have a capital budget, which meets the needs of facilities and building our schools and maintenance of those schools, and our operational budget, which goes towards teachers and the cost of education in that regard. And so we have to make sure that we are very careful when we talk about the two different budgets because they're not fungible. You can't move money from a capital budget to an operational budget or an operational budget back. So I think, again, it points back to why we have to be so careful when we're talking about our facilities and the needs that they have within them.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kowalski.
Fully aware the two separate budgets because we sit through two separate budgets. My point there is that in having conversations which I think need to happen between all bodies with respect to the town, whether it's and from the administration to the BOE to the BET and to the RTM, it's basically identifying needs. And if our needs are greater from an operational standpoint in order to provide teachers as opposed to in a building context, I have never had a conversation with anyone that had denied or said that we couldn't make changes in order to fund the needs with respect to our schools. And if we were to have open discussions about size of buildings and spending on capital versus spending in operational and how we'd like to allocate money, I've never heard that anyone denied us the ability to have that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on, let's have a look at what we got time-wise, just so everybody's aware of their time. Okay, so just so we know. Okay, getting out of the buildings. Let's go inside.
I know that.
All right, are you ready?
Next to you for 4 years.
Okay, question 6, Hannah, do you want to go? The first person to get this question is you again, Ms. Hirsh.
Do you believe that BOE members should have a role in making decisions concerning school curriculum?
Well, that's kind of an interesting question because we are given their curriculum, it's by state standard. So it's not as though we can go in. I think there's also, and change that. We have specific state standards that need to be met. And how we deliver the curriculum is something that the Board of Education and our administration sort of control. I think it's also really interesting because the definition of curriculum is there's very different versions of the definition of curriculum. I think we have large oversight when it comes to the curriculum. In many ways, it's actually one of the areas that I had been focused on for a really long time is ensuring that the curriculum across schools and grade levels is consistent. And that's something that we as a Board of Education have oversight on through the curriculum review process. I'm sorry, my brain is a little off in the moment, but we have been, a couple of years ago, it was brought forward to us and we have done a full curriculum review, not as the board, but as the administration. And we look through that. It's looking through every classroom from K to 12. And actually now we have pre-K curriculum as well. And ensuring that all of the materials that are being given to our students are up to date and all of the curriculum that's being delivered by our teachers is in line with meeting the needs of the students at every educational level. That curriculum overview is also available to parents. It's on our Greenwich Public School website, something that for years I had been asking for as a parent, and I'm thrilled to see that it's there now. But do I think it's my responsibility to discuss what's taught on a daily basis in our classrooms? No, I don't have an education. I don't have a degree as a teacher. I know that we are providing support for our teachers to ensure that our students are getting their needs met, that they are meeting their educational goals. They are being given support through professional development. We have oversight on seeing that our teachers are addressing all the needs of students, no matter what level of student that they are. But I mean, I think ultimately what it comes to is that, we have a coherent and articulated curriculum. It supports learners at all stages. And, we have textbooks that come to us. We have reviews. We discuss those. We have vetting rubrics that go through all of our curriculum. And if there's questions that are brought to us by parents, there are questions that are brought to us by educators, we as a board have reached out and asked for people to, look into that. And from time to time, there is something that may have been used a few years back that we find that is no longer addresses the right. It's not addressing the needs of our students at this particular time. And ultimately, I use this as an example, math, which really shouldn't change, does change. We are reviewing new textbooks for AP, BC and 8B calculus right now. We put in a new math program for younger students, Big Ideas Math, and we're reaping the benefits of that and seeing how that is changing our students' learning. We have taken more opportunities to take a cross-curricular look and seeing how science and math and English can kind of work together. And I think we as a board have been very strongly in support of asking those questions that make sure that we meet the academic needs of our students. And making sure that they're meeting their growth. So for us, it's not for me to say what is taught on a daily basis, but making sure that it's taught properly so our students are meeting those growth, needs.
Ms. Kowalski.
The simple answer to your question is yes. We have policies in regards to this, particularly policy 6161. We also are governed by state statute. Boards of education in the state of Connecticut are governed by state statute. And particularly our policy says that any textbook or learning material that will serve the function of the textbook, hard copy or digital, must be processed through the district curriculum committee following the district regulations concerning adoption of textbooks and formally adopted by the Board of Education. This applies to a textbook or digital material that will be used as the primary learning tool on an ongoing basis with the majority of students in a class, course, or learning group within a class. And that's what our policy says. I believe the board should follow that policy, and that involves the selection and the approval of curriculum.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Koven.
I think that the Board of Ed is sort of, as we discussed before, and I think Karen spoke to this, is like at a high level, you want to make sure that we have the appropriate curriculum in place. And as a parent, I've seen changes in curriculum. For example, the reading curriculum has changed in the elementary schools, and we've moved over to foundations. I don't know if everyone has followed the debate about phonics, learning to read with phonics, or is this the other curriculum we're using? And I do see that there's significant improvements that we've made when we change curriculum. And I do think the board has a role there. I am not an educator. That's not my background. So I don't feel like I should be looking at a granular level and making recommendations to the teaching staff on specifically, what should be taught. I appreciate that the statute has language about that, and certainly we can look at specific textbooks, but we have 15 schools. We have 8,662 students. I don't think that we're going to be able to look at every material that's being taught in our schools. So at some point we have to trust the learning professionals. And I think that our teachers are top notch. I think our administrators are top notch. So, if we have the right people in place and they're following the standards of the curriculum, the standards of the state, I feel good about that. And, our job is to provide oversight and to do review when appropriate. But, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to be engaging in a very granular level on what's happening in the classroom.
Okay, any other comments about this question? Okay, moving on. Thank you. Ms. Kowalski, you get this one first.
As BOE members, are you concerned that the arts and history are given less priority in our curriculum? And would you be in favor of increasing arts and history in our schools?
Can you just repeat that one more time? I just want to make sure I understood the beginning of it.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.
As BOE members, are you concerned that the arts and history are given less priority in our curriculum? And would you be in favor of increasing arts and history in our schools?
So I think that arts and history should be treated in equal balance to any other subject matter that is in our curriculum, as I assume you're comparing it to science and mathematics. But I do think the arts and history play an important role, and Greenwich has in particular a wonderful art program, both from a music and drawing. It has a wide range of opportunities. We saw a shrinking of that a bit during the COVID time period, but I'm proud to say that those programs are in full force and effect as of today. And our students, and we see this often within at our board meetings, come in, they've received outstanding awards for their music and other artistic achievements, as well as history. I am a history buff. I gave up reading fiction in my adult life because time is short and I have a lot to learn. So I don't read fiction anymore. I only read history because I didn't learn enough when I was your age. So I do believe that those classes should have equal weight in comparison to anything else in the math and science component. And we have a huge course book at Greenwich High School, which I'm particularly proud of. And there are a lot of unique classes for which students can offer to take. To be quite honest, sitting here, I'm not aware of a decrease in our arts or history. In fact, we're looking at approving a new history curriculum book that was brought to the board that has a lot of interesting features in it. And it's one of the main focuses that they're looking on. Going back to curriculum for just a minute, there's a huge schedule in which we got at our last meeting that I'm sure is available on how curriculum is reviewed. And history is on it right now, and that's what we're looking at. And I think as well as our art program that is run by Ms. Laura Newell. She's fantastic. And she even spoke about the curriculum on the art program at our last board meeting and noted that there were no recent curriculum changes, but she's been very proud of the district and has the full support of Dr. Jones in expanding that. We have a beautiful auditorium at the high school for which people can have utilized. And I think that that's wonderful. And I have yet to hear that we're falling behind in that. But if we are, I would want to know about it because I do think it should be corrected.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Koven.
I agree that I think that art and history should be given equal time to other subjects. And certainly at the high school level, 2 of my children have participated in the music program and the choral program in particular. And I think that is one of the most spectacular programs. And during COVID, that was one of the things that I was most sad about, was missing out on those concerts. And when they came back, I was so happy. And I don't know if anyone in the room was at Patrick Taylor's final holiday concert last year, and all of the graduates came back and you couldn't even fit in the auditorium at Greenwich High School when they sing the Alleluia chorus, and it's just unreal. And I think that's just one of the absolute strengths of the high school for me. Especially my children have participated in the music program, but I think the dramatic program is amazing. The visual arts, I believe there are 5 AP arts programs at Greenwich High School. Whoops. And I think the history curriculum is also excellent. And at the high school level, one of the things that I like so much about Greenwich High School is because we're in a big high school, there's an opportunity for students to really pursue their passion. So if they want to pursue history, if they want to pursue art, there's just so many course offerings. And I think that's one of the strengths of our school. In the elementary school, I will say that I think that we have a great arts program, but I also really appreciate that the PTAs are so involved in supporting, in particular, the music program and the musicals, and having play in a day at Riverside School is always a highlight. And there's a day where there's poetry writing, and so I just want to commend that effort on behalf of the PTA, that I think that they really work very hard to supplement the art offerings in the elementary school level.
Ms. Hirsh.
Well, I have to say I would disagree that arts and history don't get enough attention. I know that Ms. Kowalski and I were very strongly in support of making sure that art and music were brought back during COVID. As you know, I say this often, not every student that walks through our door is an academic or an athletic student. Some of them are artistic. Some of them are focused on history. We need to meet every single one of our students where they are and help bring forward those the areas where they are successful and that they love. Art and music are consistently an area where our students tend to thrive. I know both of my children developed a love of art and history through our schools. In fact, my daughter's taking a class at the high school called Shapers, which is a very well-known and unique program that is art and history combined. We provide support. It's a very unique program. And so I'd say, her interest in going forward in college might be through history because of our strong history programs. I would say just because we don't see markers or goals for art and history specifically or social studies as part of our strategic plan doesn't mean it's not as important to us as Board of Education members, to our superintendent, to our school principals, or to any of our educators. We have cross-curricular programs within our schools. So oftentimes art and music are brought in into our math program. They are often brought into our reading and language arts programs. So you will see art and music pop up everywhere, from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade and beyond. So I would say, I don't think that it's less focused on. We have students who've won unbelievable awards in art. We've had students who have won unbelievable awards, and our music program as well as award winning. And I believe we also have students who've participated in the history challenge and won awards. So I would say that, we're trying to meet our students where their needs are, and they succeed and they thrive in the area of art and music. It's exceptionally important. And that's why I think it's brought in through all of our different, subjects through school.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this question? Okay, moving on. The next question first goes to Ms. Koven.
What are your views on the LGBTQA plus student community and their right to participate in student activities as they self-identify?
I think that as parents, when we send our children to school, we always want to feel like they are safe and accepted for who they are. And, I think that we should all strive for that and have a community that is very empathetic and compassionate. And I want all students in the Greenwich Public Schools to feel like they are welcome to participate fully in the schools. So, I guess I don't know. I feel like maybe this is a bit of a leading question, but that would be my answer, is I think that everyone is welcome and everyone is welcome to participate.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsh.
I actually agree with Ms. Koven. I think that one of the things that we look the most to do is support our students and make sure they have a connection with an adult in our schools. It's one of the biggest things that we can do to ensure academic and achievement, and that a sense of community and well-being for our students within our schools. And we recognize every single student walks in with different needs, no matter what they are. And I think because we have such an incredibly diverse and welcoming and opening community, we have to meet our students where they are, and provide support so that they feel that they have a community within their school, no matter what their needs are.
And Ms. Kowalski.
All children should feel safe and welcomed wherever they go and whatever they do. I think that means protecting all of our children in whatever activities they participate in. I think that this is a broader discussion that has a lot of nuances that can't be dealt within the period of time for which we have here this evening. I also think that the situation of making sure that all children feel safe and protected in their environment needs to be handled delicately and as the situations arise. But every child should feel accepted in their school, should feel a sense of welcoming, and should feel safe. And that includes not just LGBTQ plus community members, but every member of all communities. That's why there was, signs outside of schools should say, all students welcome, because I think that encapsulates everyone that's attending that school. And there should be no differences drawn. If a student doesn't feel safe, if a student doesn't feel accepted, then we should know about it. their administrators should know about it, teachers should know about it, and we should make sure and correct the wrong. But we need to know what the wrong is first before we can correct it. But it's a delicate subject that I think deserves a lot of conversation. And, but Greenwich Public Schools has, policies in place for which the board has approved in the last couple of years that deal with these specific issues that allow for anti-discrimination. And if any child feels unwelcome or in a place, an unsafe place, they should raise that to an administrator immediately because that's not tolerated here at GPS.
Thank you. Next question goes to Ms. Hirsh first.
Do you believe BOE members should vet books that appear in school libraries? Why or why not?
Well, I think I've addressed this before in the questions when we were talking about, we have vetting rubrics. I think that our librarians and our library staff does an exceptional job of selecting books for our students that address the students at the level that they are reading wise and are appropriate for them academically. Oftentimes, especially at the elementary school, if you go into a library, you'll see a student who'd bring a book forward, like Harry Potter, for instance, and a teacher will tell them, that our librarians say that that's a little advanced for you, the subject matter and or the reading level, and then suggest something that's more appropriate. I would also say that, we have a vetting rubric so that when there are certain books that are brought forward that, some people are uncomfortable with, it goes through the vetting process. I would simply also point to the fact that what is an appropriate book for one student may not be an appropriate book for another student. And what's in our library is up to those students to sort of make that decision, especially once they get to the high school level. I think that there are books that cover difficult subjects that sometimes students look for to help them understand things that they're experiencing or going through, while others will overlook those books consistently because it's not something that is of interest, a subject that's interesting to them, and so forth. But, we have had parents bring questions to us about books before, and they're taken seriously. We do look at them because what might be appropriate from years before may not be appropriate now. But ultimately, I would say almost every single book that we've had shared with us has been vetted and has been appropriate. And like I said, we every student has the opportunity to take out books that meet their needs. But anything that's in our classroom is specifically vetted to go through and focus on what the student learning objectives are.
Thank you, Ms. Kowalski.
So I agree in large part with what Ms. Hirsh had said. There is a vetting rubric for which the administration and our media specialists, which have a very special role in the selection of books. I think the key element is giving a wide array of books and marking them appropriately for age appropriateness. And I think that's been the critical role that we have faced in the last year, is about whether or not certain books are appropriate for certain age levels. And when that was brought to the administration of the board's attention, they were reviewed, and there were several changes made with respect to where books should be placed. Obviously, I agree with Karen. Kids and families are at different levels and different stages in their life as to what things are appropriate versus not appropriate. And I think that if a student is checking out a book out of curiosity, you know what? That is something that they should have access to. And this is a conversation that should also happen at home. This is not just, books are there to be read. And they should have access to, all children should have access to books. I think it comes in twofold. One, making sure that they're age appropriate in the right place, which we are taking painstaking efforts to make sure has happened. But also two, I think that decisions at home need to be made about what books you think are appropriate for your own children, and make that decision, because what's appropriate in one person's house is not appropriate in another. And no one should have the right to say carte blanche across the district.
Thank you, Ms. Koven.
I agree. I mean, I do not think that my judgment should be the judgment for all of the children in the district. I think that would be very inappropriate for me to go into the library. There we have very highly credentialed professionals who are making those decisions, and I think people have worked hard to make sure that the right books are in the library and are in the appropriate areas. And I just want to echo what Karen said, parents are the most important educational partner for their children. And even if someone goes to school and gets a book that you feel like maybe that's not a book that I would have picked for my child, that's the beginning of a conversation, right? There's an opportunity to learn about what your child is interested in, what your child is concerned about. And our kids are only in school really half of the days of the year, and the other half they're with you, they're at home. And I really think, I was reflecting on this today, and I was thinking about how my parents are still the people I turn to when I want to talk about difficult subjects, or when things are as they are very difficult in the world right now. I call my parents and talk to my parents, and I think parents are that key educational partner for their children. And the schools, the materials that they find at school is an opportunity to start a conversation with your children at home.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this? Go ahead, Ms.
Yeah,
Kowalski.
so I just want to echo Ms. Koven's comments, because I do think her emphasis on the taking the next level on the family level is really important. But but also to the extent that those parents that are listening that feel that there's a book that's come across the library that they find might be inappropriately placed or for the wrong at the wrong age level, that doesn't mean that we're saying don't bring it to our attention, because it's the beginning of a conversation about whether or not it is appropriate, and appropriately labeling a book for so that a child understands what they're picking up, I think is also important, so that there are no surprises.
Thanks. Okay, this will probably be our last question. And the first question goes to Ms. Koven. Go ahead.
Teacher morale is very low across the nation and has led to teacher shortages across the nation. Although Greenwich does not have a teacher shortage, we are not immune to moral issues. What steps can the board take to improve morale and avoid the potential for teacher shortages in Greenwich?
My sister is a school teacher, and actually she's the reason that I'm running for the Board of Ed, because she asked me to get more involved, because she said being a teacher is incredibly difficult, and especially after COVID, it was extremely hard. And I think it's a noble profession. And I think part of it is the way that we talk about our teachers in town, and that we need to acknowledge that the work that they're doing is incredibly challenging. They're being asked not just to teach academic subjects, but to kind of support our children in a wide array of ways that wasn't expected, frankly, when I was in high school. So it's just an incredibly hard job. In terms of the Board of Education, I think that we can support our teachers by advocating for proper funding of our schools, is a huge thing that we can do. And I think that our town needs to stand by when we say that our teachers are important and that our students are important, our schools are important, we need to fund our schools. We've already discussed this tonight, but we're 5 years behind on our capital plan. And, it is put your money where your mouth is. If you really care about this, why are we not investing in it? Teachers are in these school buildings all day long. They're in buildings that are subpar. And I think it's challenging for them. And I think if we can try to make their working conditions better, by investing in schools, I think we can fund our operating budget more generously than we have been doing. I mean, we've been holding our operating budget to a 2.9 increase, which actually is a shrinking budget, because our contractually obligated costs are higher than that. So every year our teachers are trying to do the same or more with less money. And every year they're working in buildings that are degrading. And so I think part of what we can do for our teachers to raise morale is, as a town, to get behind the schools and say, we really do care about the schools, and we're going to demonstrate that we care about the schools by funding the projects that we've been talking about, by, being more generous in our funding of the operating budget. I think those are huge things that we can do for our teachers, because we do have the most fabulous teachers and we still are attracting excellent teachers. And I'm so grateful for that. But I think we can't take them for granted. And I think we have been taking them for granted. And, sooner or later, the teachers are going to start looking around at other school districts and seeing what they're doing and what they're willing to do. And it's going to be attractive for them to go elsewhere. So I think we really need to demonstrate that we care about them by making those investments.
Thank you, Ms. Kowalski.
Thought I went to the other way.
I'm sorry.
It's Ms. Hirsh. Isn't it go that way? I was just sticking to the.
Either way, we can go that way if
I
you'd
don't
like.
care. I'm happy to answer.
I think you were next.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Can you read the question again, please? Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes, of course. Teacher morale is very low across the nation and has led to teacher shortages across the nation. Although Greenwich does not have a teacher shortage, we are not immune to morale issues. What steps can the board take to improve morale and avoid the potential for teacher shortages in Greenwich?
So we just got back our climate survey, and I'm happy to report that morale is on the upward trajectory, which I think is great. I think it says a lot about the decisions that the board has made over the last year, which included a sizable pay increase. And I also think it is compliments to our administration, who has been also listening to our teachers and with respect to their needs and what they're looking to do. I think we need to continue to support our teachers, listen to our teachers, understand what their needs are, and help facilitate that process. Teachers coming back after COVID, did God's work, because all the parents, including I'm sure the two parents that are sitting next to me, realized they didn't become teachers for a reason, and they sent their children to school. We should remember that on a regular basis. And part of my job is what I've been doing on the board is I regularly meet with teachers. We go out to dinner, we go have a glass of wine, we grab a cup of coffee. I'm listening to them. I want to hear what they have to say, but I think supporting them not only from just I think the key issue is supporting them from fundamentally just from a positive environment. Over the last several years, the classroom has been quite divisive in the sense and divisive not only in the classroom, but outside the classroom with respect to teachers. And I think teachers have been walking on eggshells not to upset parents. And I think that's the wrong way to approach it. I think parents should be fully supportive of their teachers and have ongoing conversations with their teachers. You wouldn't approach, a teacher in a confrontational capacity. I think you should engage your teachers and have an open conversation about them with your children. I think parents would be surprised about the reception they get back, because teachers are there for a reason, right? They're there because they love kids. They want to educate. They want to do the best by your children. And I think that in order to increase the morale for teachers is to have a respectful conversation with them about about their students, about your children, and support them. And if you don't like something that your teacher has done with your student, it's not to go on the full force attack. It is to have a conversation with them, a dialogue, and start the conversation with, I heard this happened. Can you explain more? Because there are three sides to every story. And I think that's critically important in this day and age with respect to teachers, because we'd like to get the most out of our teachers. And the way you get the most out of anyone is providing them a positive work environment and positive support from the adults that they're interacting with every day. It's not your children. They interact with your children, but they also interact with the parents. And that's critical. And so that's how I would say that we continue to increase morale. I think, money is always going to be an issue on the table. But when I have a teacher that wants to come to Greenwich, I want them to be able to say, I want to come to Greenwich because the students and the parents in the community are a wonderful place to teach, because I have the support of the parents behind. And that's not only just financial. That's being there and being present and having positive conversations and reinforcing what your teachers are doing in the classroom at home. And that's a two-way street. And I think that's how you get morale up and how you attract good teachers to the Greenwich community.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsh.
I come from a family of educators. My mother was a special educator. My mother-in-law had her doctorate in early childhood education and taught kindergarten and ran a school. So I have a unique perspective, and I think our educators are the most important members of our society. They're raising an entire generation and sending them off to be successful going forward. And never before have we had a requirement for our teachers to, I shouldn't say our teachers, but we have never really had a profession that has been required to learn how to do their job or relearn how to do their job while currently doing their job, which is what our teachers had to do during COVID. We are also asking more of them than just showing up at school and teaching our students. We're asking them to ensure that our students' mental well-being is good. We're asking them to make sure that their physical well-being is good. We're asking them to look for signs of learning disabilities. We're asking more and more of our educators. And so it's hard. It's hard. Their morale, we've heard, is low, which is exactly why it's one of our goals in our strategic plan, which was just approved by the board last year, to increase the positive working environment for teachers and staff. We make sure that we give a survey every year to hear feedback from them and seeing what we can do to support them. One of the biggest things we can do to support them is through budgetary needs, is providing more professional development, providing them more support when they walk into their classroom so they don't have to spend all of their downtime at home also working towards creating lesson plans and going through all the data. The more support that we can provide for our educators to go into our classrooms and teach, the better. They make connections with our students, and we want to support them as well as parents. But ultimately, like I said, I think we're asking more and more of our teachers now than we have ever in the past. It's understandable why teachers are feeling frustrated. So in any way that we can support them, I think is positive. And I think that starts with our parents, making sure that they, reach out to thank a teacher. I think in a lot of ways, parents do that. I would say one of the other things I do, I spend a lot of time, I meet with, and talk to the head of our Education Association, GEA. I've spent a lot of time speaking with teachers and administrators, and they share concerns, and we look to address them. That's our job as a Board of Education, is sort of hearing from not just parents and not just students, but from our educators, because without them, they're just, buildings with kids in them. Our teachers are really what makes this education and the education in Greenwich so special. They are the most dedicated individuals that I have ever had the pleasure of working with, and I see it on a daily basis. With my own students and students that, friends, students and children. So I don't know, I think the best thing that we can do is sort of ask them what it is that they need to kind of support them within our schools.
Thank you. It's time for our 2-minute closing statements. And Ms. Kowalski, you may go first. Let me make sure our timers are ready to go.
Oh, you don't need to time me. I'm not going to take 2 minutes.
Okay.
What I heard here tonight was a lot of positive and good thoughts between 3 women who are going to be working together. And I think the reporters will probably say, yeah, there's a hardline Republican, but the thing is, I didn't say a lot of hardline Republican things. What I said is that we are all here to work with our students, for our students. And the things that we all agree on are certainly academic achievement, student support, focusing on our students, improving GPS, making sure we're building the right infrastructure at the right price. And these are all things that we agree on. And I think that I'm looking forward to the next 4 years with working with these fine women next to me, as well as the other 5 members that will also serve on the board. And I think that we need to just make a commitment that there's a lot that needs to get done, and we need to be focused and sharp and work together.
Thank you. Ms. Koven.
So I'm running for the Board of Ed for 3 reasons. And the first reason is I'm a very grateful parent. We moved to Riverside 12 years ago for the public schools. We've had a tremendous experience. I'm 12 years in. I have 8 more years to go, and I want to give back. And so that's why I'm running. That's my first reason for running for Board of Ed. My second reason is I'm a very concerned citizen. I think that we haven't invested in our schools. The fact that we're 5 years behind on the 2018 plan is deeply concerning to me. In COVID, when we were in the, just in the beginning of the pandemic, when the decision was made by the DET that it was time to cut the Board of Ed budget, and that's what we did instead of focusing on how are we educating our children, that was deeply concerning to me as a parent and as a citizen. I think that was a terrible choice. And so I'm running because I feel like we need to get involved and we need to advocate for our kids. And the third reason I'm running is I work as a mediator, and we live in a divisive world right now. And actually, it was extremely heartening tonight to sit up here with Karen and Karen because I think the way that we find our path forward is that we need to work together. We need to collaborate. We need to organize ourselves around shared values and shared interests. And I think that we all value education and we all want a quality education for our children. And it's all in our best interest that Greenwich is a vibrant town and that we have high property values, which is supported by the schools. So that's why I'm running, and I look forward to working with all 8 members of the Board of Ed, and especially these 2 women tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Hirsh.
First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters of Greenwich, our moderators, timers, and Hannah Klingbeil from the Greenwich High School for hosting tonight's debate. Your time, dedication to ensuring that our residents are educated and informed is very appreciated. I've been involved in supporting and advocating for the needs of our students for over a decade and a half. And I've worked collaboratively with my fellow board members and other elected officials to make informed decisions, and I will continue to do so. I think we probably heard from me in the past and as well as tonight that my top priorities are certainly supporting student growth and achievement, well-being, and their well-being, and remaining focused on our special education program, which we really didn't touch upon tonight, and the overall curriculum to ensure that they're meeting the quality and consistency of educational delivery district-wide. Every single one of our students deserves a supportive and inclusive learning environment, and we have to strive to provide the resources to ensure their success. I also believe that investing in school infrastructure is not just a responsibility, but a necessity. It's fundamental to provide our students with the tools, resources, and opportunities that they require to thrive academically and personally. We as a board in the past 4 years and beyond that have made notable progress, but there's still so much more work to be done. And to that end, without the support financially and otherwise of our select people, the BET and RTM, the Board of Education can only do so much. Civic engagement and education is important, as is voting for your locally elected officials, as we have a major impact on our community and your daily life. If you're here and listening, then you're already engaged in that process. But what I ask of you is to help us support our schools and community by making sure that your friends and neighbors are registered and that they show up to vote. Remind them that their vote is their voice, and every vote counts. Thank you for all your support.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here tonight on screen and wherever you are at home. And thank you to all of you for stepping up and serving the public. And thank you to the board, the League of Greenwich, for having me here. It's been really great, and I really appreciate everyone. And you stole my thunder, Ms. Hirsh. Everybody, please turn out to vote. Local elections are way more important than the other ones, as we know, and you should find out. That's where our future politicians come from. Thank you very much.
All politics is local.
Exactly.
At next week, October 18th, is the BET debate. Or Bean Square.
Hey, Karen.
Yeah.
Should I keep